I want to share with you what actually works for me, what worked for learning software, and what has been working for learning game dev. This gave me the opportunity to work on multi-million and multi-billion dollar projects. If you've started 3 games and finished none, then this video is for you. I taught myself software development over the course of a year. I spent hours at night grinding it out, learning every little bit I could while working full-time and while raising a family. So after 1 year of teaching myself code, I landed my first software job. This gave me the opportunity to work on multi-million and multi-billion dollar projects. So when I started game dev, I thought I had it in the bag. I thought I could just jump right in, listen to some YouTube devs, and it would be easy. Boy, was I wrong. I listened to the advice, tried engines, tried 3D, I bought the courses, but I didn't finish a game. I spent too much time planning, working on game design documents, working on hooks, working on the story. It took me a while, but I realized the process I was following, the mainstream process that is out there, was not getting me anywhere. That got me looking back at my software career and how I actually learned software development. And I realized I was doing something different this time for game dev. I want to share with you what actually works for me, what worked for learning software, and what has been working for learning game dev. So the first thing I'm going to talk about, what I ran into, was I had no clear path. When I was learning software, I had a path I developed by listening to those around me, by listening to the YouTubers, the devs out there, on how to actually build a software career or software path and get into the field, get into the industry. And I did that by building projects. But when it came to game dev, all the advice at first seemed good, it seemed right, it seemed helpful, even by successful devs who have published successful games. But once I started diving into it, actually starting to learn, I realized that a lot of it was fluff, a lot of it was surface level, and it didn't actually give me a path or direction on where to go. They tell you to pick an engine, they describe what the engines are, maybe do 2D, maybe do 3D, build out your story, build out a hook, document things, and those are all good and helpful tips. But then when I picked my engine and I thought I had a story and I thought I had games and I thought I had ideas and I had a grand plan and I went to develop the game or implement the game and I knew how to code at this point, when I went to go implement the game, I didn't know what choices to make next. I didn't know if I should do color theory or work on my environment or work on my character or build out the main mechanics, or if I should really develop everything mechanic-wise and then work on environment, or should I do a little bit of both? And I caught myself over-planning on multiple games, planning a game, trying to implement it, and realizing I didn't have the skill set for that game. And then rinse and repeat. Planning a new game, trying to implement it, and realize I didn't have the skill set for that one either. Thinking in my mind originally that I had the skill set, that I knew how to code, I've worked on major projects, working and helping design multi-billion dollar projects in a different field, different sector, in the tech sector. I thought I had it in the bag. I thought I could easily do this. I knew how to draw some. I had 3D modeling skills like some Autodesk and Inventor. I didn't have Blender skills, but I had other 3D modeling skills. But when I went to actually design my game or actually implement the game, I didn't know what path there was. And with game dev, there's an endless amount of paths to take. So I spent time typical watching tutorials, and tutorials are great. There's a lot of technical tutorials out there. There's great Udemy courses, but none of them actually teach the full discipline of making the game. With having no path, I just kept repeating and starting games over and over and over and over. But I never actually finished any of them. A few here and there that were smaller games, but I never actually finished any of the major games I wanted to complete. And this was unlike my software career, unlike my software learning path, my software journey, where I built a portfolio of projects back to back over a series of months, starting with small projects to a major social media site that was fully functional, and I used these to land my software job. I didn't have this with game dev. So I needed to look back and see what worked before and what's not working now. What I realized was I didn't switch languages when I was learning software. I didn't go from HTML with JavaScript and CSS over to Python or to C++ or to C#. I stuck with one framework, one language, one code set, And I built out from that. I stacked on top of that, learned some React, learned some MongoDB, some Node.js, some Vue.js. I built on top of that. With game dev, it was different though. Game dev, switching engines, I tried Playmaker, I tried Unity, I tried Unreal Engine, bounced around between them. I went back and forth between using coding and using visual scripting, didn't know which one would be better or more efficient. So I had to take a step back and look at what worked for me in the past and apply that to what worked for me now. And when I did, I saw a major change in my progress, and I'm still seeing that today. So what did I do? I stuck with one engine, and I picked Unity, not because I think it's better than any other engine and not because I have any affiliation with them. It's because out of the box, I think Unity was the best set for me. I tried Unreal and I really wanted Unreal Engine to work because I like C++, but I had so many compile errors with Unreal and so many build errors with Unreal where I had to constantly delete my build package and rebuild it. And I liked Playmaker, it just didn't have the things I wanted. I wasn't really into 2D. I'm not really into 2D games as much. I don't play them that much, so I don't make 2D games. I prefer 3D, and Unity can tackle that. I'm sure Godot is good. I just haven't ever attempted to use Godot. It was between Unity, Playmaker, and C++, or completely learning a brand new engine. So I went with Unity. Unity was the best option for me at the time, and I still think it's the best option for me now. I'm not telling you to pick Unity. I'm just saying that's what worked for me. If you like if you like Unreal, use Unreal. If you like Godot, use Godot. If you like Unity, great. If you don't like any of these, you want to write out a game or build out a game without an engine, go for it. Wouldn't recommend it, but go for it. After that, what did I do? I picked an engine and I stuck with it based on my preference of making 3D games. Then I decided to go through a few tutorials from start to finish and publish the tutorials. So I learned the full game process of publishing a game, how to build and how to upload to a site. Then I used tutorials as reference, not as a crutch, but as reference. I used it as a reference for solving the problems. For if I needed a UI system, then I could reference a tutorial. If I needed to figure out how to do navigation, I referenced the tutorial. If I needed to do some AI logic, referenced the tutorial. I didn't rely on the tutorial, but I referenced it, right? And I started using AI. I started using ChatGPT and Claude, not as a crutch, not as relying on them, but to solve problems, to solve bugs, to help me build frameworks, to get ideas. And I would highly recommend using AI for this. I would not rely on AI. You're going to be way better off by learning to code by yourself and not relying on AI. But use AI. It's a tool. It's here to stay, and it's only going to get better, and you're going to fall behind if you don't use it. So then with picking an engine and using tutorials, I decided to start small projects, learning scope. A new scope from software side, I needed to learn the game dev scope. So start with a small project. I did a 24-hour challenge, right? I didn't do it all in one 24-hour sitting. I did that over a few days, but did a few hours at a time, and it equated to 24 hours. Did a 1-month challenge, then you could do a 3-month challenge, 6-month challenge, and you scope up and you meet your deadlines. That's what I did. I met my deadlines, whether the game was good or bad, whether it was fully complete or was buggy. I met my deadlines, and then you can come back and update it. But I wanted to publish the game. I wanted to meet those deadlines to see what I could push myself, what I had to do, what to cut corners, or when to cut corners, when to take features out, when to add features, when to use the little smoke and mirrors, because most of video games is smoke and mirrors. Things are happening or not actually happening how they appear to be. This really gave me the momentum to keep moving forward. What was the next piece of advice that I was following that was really hurting me? That was starting too big. So like most other devs out there, I've watched the videos, I watched the success stories, listened to the stories, bought the courses, joined the Discords, watched the tutorials, thinking, I have a great game idea. I've been thinking of this game for years, or I have all these awesome ideas, and I'm special. I'm somewhat special, so I can make a game that I can skip making 10 easy games, or 10 small games, or 10 bad games, and my first game is going to be amazing. I'm sure plenty of you have been there. I was there. And so I tried that. And like I said, planned out games, tried to implement it, and failed. And I still have these game ideas, and I still like these game ideas, and I'm going to save them for later. But at the time when I was first starting out, I was just not good enough to implement them. So what did I do to fix that? Really, this is no real fault to any dev out there. This is more of an ego thing. Because most of the devs out there will tell you to make small projects, to start small, to your first game's going to suck, and that's mostly true, that you need to build projects to learn. So that was really no fault to anyone out there or any bad advice. It was more of an ego thing. And it took me a while to learn or realize that I was also trying to make a game as quick as possible and try to become successful from it. And then I had to look back again at what worked for me learning software. And I started with small projects. I started with a single web page and then to a simple to-do list, I believe it was, that you could create sticky notes, and then to a weather app using an API, and a login page using Google Auth, and then a social media site, right? Storing data, working with their server, working with a database. So I started with small projects and I worked my way up. And I needed to do that with game dev, and I just didn't want to do that. I thought it was going to be something different, or I was something special. So I learned the hard way, right? So I changed that. Like I said, I started with small projects, 24-hour challenges, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. And I'm still building off of that, and I'm learning from it. And it's what worked for me while learning software. It's what works in the actual software industry. Starting small, minimal viable product, MVP, get that out to the customer, and then iterate, update, push update, new versions, and move on from there. Start small and work your way up. So if I were to start over and do this again, I would start small. I would make small games. I would follow tutorials, the first few tutorials. I would make ugly games. I would follow tutorials to completion and publish those games. Start with a week, maybe another. I would make 4 games in my first month, and not 4 of my own games, 4 tutorial games. Not to learn exactly how to make games or the technical details, the process of starting a project, creating a project, which type of project, because the engines, at least I know with Unity, there's a lot of options when creating a project, and it can get kind of overwhelming. So creating a project, knowing which project to create, building some assets on the inside, some mechanics, and then publishing that. That's what I would focus on the first month, learning the basic game dev process. And then I would go on to starting a 1-month project of my own, a 3-month project of my own, and so on. Third point is I wasn't consistent. And not really fully that I wasn't consistent making games. I was always making something, but I was having to split up my time through making games and working on YouTube. And that's my own fault. And some of you might be trying to do the same thing, where you want to devlog everything. And I think devlogs are great, but it does take away your time from learning game dev. And if I were to go back and start over, I wouldn't devlog and make a game at the same time, at least not for my first year. There were times I would spend every day making a game, but then I had to stop because I had to start focusing on my next video of the devlog, right? I had put so much time in, now I need to make a video. So I had to go back and record and get footage. And that took away game dev time. That took away a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, depending on how much content I put into the video. That took away from actually learning. I didn't do this for learning software. I didn't care about vlogging it. But when I was learning game dev, I saw that there were successful devlogs out there, and it was a way to market. So I thought I could do the same thing. Well, I was wrong. If you want to devlog, go for it. That's up to you. But if I were to start over, I wouldn't devlog with it, at least not for my first year, and at least not for until I actually started on an established game that I wanted to release for selling, like on Steam. I was consistent with working daily. I learned that skill set. I was consistent with building my game when I was deving, and I learned that from doing my software. Like I've said before, I learned that from doing at least 1 hour of dev a day, 1 hour to 4 hours. When I was learning software, I would come home from work, I'd help my wife with the kids, we'd put them to bed, and then for 1 to 4 hours, usually 2 to 4 hours, but starting out it was 1 to 4, I would learn and build projects and learn. And I did that every single day for about a year learning software. And I was applying that to game dev, and it was working. But then when I had to do my devlogs, I had to stop. and I had to take weeks out of my time to focus on making videos, making content. For consistency, I would put probably 1 hour a day in at least. 1 hour short, but it's at least, and it's consistent. And you do that every single day, and over a week, you'll put in 7 hours maybe if you do 1 hour. You might think, well, I can put 6 hours in on the weekend. But it's been proven through studies, through research, that learning something over a period of time consistently is more beneficial than cramming in a short period of time. You hold it better, you retain it better. The windows of between actual learning, you are processing information and you are making connections that you wouldn't otherwise make if you were just cramming. So I would make sure I'm consistent when I'm learning game dev. My fourth point is lying to myself about doing research, right? And what I mean by that is playing games. Now, I rarely play video games for recreation. Once in a while, I'll throw it in there. Not because, I don't want to. I want to, but there's just not enough time in the day working, taking care of my kids, learning game dev, creating content, and playing video games. I would convince myself that I would play Resident Evil 2 or DayZ or whatever the game was that I was into at the time. I'd be playing it and I would do research, right? I would learn from that game. And I know plenty of you are thinking the same thing. But let's get real. More than 30 minutes of playing a game, you're not really learning anything, at least not from a game dev point of view. And what I mean is, if you cram 6 hours of Elden Ring in, or say Oblivion, since that's hot right now, you're not really learning from it because you're not really thinking about the game dev process, right? You're not thinking every input, if I press X or press a key or triangle or using the analogs or the mouse or the joysticks or how the menus work or the sounds. You're not really thinking about that when you're into the game playing it for fun. And to think about that, to get into that, you don't need to put a lot of time into it. You only really need 30 minutes at a time to sit down, turn on a game, play it for 30 minutes, think about the actions, think about the input, think about how the character is feeling, how the character is moving, the sounds around you, the effects. You don't need to spend a lot of time to really think about and see and feel and test what it's like. So I had to cut back how much time I was putting into games. And I know a lot of people think out there that, well, if you don't play games, then you're disconnected and you can't really make games well. But that's not true. From starting out, if you're wanting to learn game dev, and if you're watching this video and you've made it this long, this far, then I assumed you do want to make games, then you probably have enough experience playing games. You probably have enough of that through the years of you playing them to have a basic understanding of how games work, right? The fine details that really make or break a game, because the last 10% of the game is what really makes it a great game or not. The fine details, what the negative reviews typically are on Steam, are because of the last 10% of the menu settings, the VFX, the sounds, the bloom, the post-processing, stuff like that. That's typically what players complain about. Optimization. You don't really need to worry about any of that during your first game or during your first year of learning. Really using research as an excuse, it's not a very good one. At least I don't think so. I think you know enough as a player to make games. You know enough how games work. And you can go and reference games in the future while you're developing, while you're learning. If you really like a menu or a UI or how some system worked in the game, you can go and reference it. But it doesn't take 6 hours to reference that or to analyze it or to go check it out. So that's what I mean. If you're saying, I'm going to sit down and play 3 hours, you're wasting your time. You're not doing 3 hours of research. You're probably not even doing 30 minutes of research if you're planning on playing for 3 hours. You're just playing a game. You could be taking 2 hours of that time and putting it to game dev and learning. So don't make that mistake like I did. Playing games is not really research, and there's a lot of wasted time out there. What would I do different? I would take some of my game time and move that over to dev time, right? If I would usually game for 3 hours after work, game for 1 hour, take those 2 extra hours and put them into dev time. So point 5, as I touched on it earlier, was I kept switching projects. And I switched projects for multiple reasons, right? It depended on the project. First was I got bored of the project, right? I had a great idea, really into it, It's going to be the next big game. And then I played a game or watched videos of a game or watched a movie and I was into a new genre, right? And then that was the next big project. And I thought it was a great idea and a great storyline. And then I played a new game or a new genre or watched another movie and I switched genres again, switch games, switch projects. So that's the first type of switching I ran into. The second type was I planned out a game, did all the research, created a storyline, built out my characters, created my game design documents, built out systems, wrote out the basic versions of systems like coding systems, built out just not coding, more sequences, flowcharts, stuff like that, sequences, activities. Built that out, had great ideas, character design, spent days, weeks designing characters because I had some drawing skills. And then I go to implement it and it starts off good, got to get the character moving, get some mechanics going, maybe design some environment. And then I hit a roadblock and another roadblock. And then I realize I run into something that is way above my skill level when it comes to game dev, right? And switch projects again. And then you realize, or then I realized that every time I switch a project, I'm just starting over. I might start a little bit above the starting line from the little bit of experience I gained, but not much. A position or two from the finish line, or a position or two from the starting line. And I needed to do something different. So a lot of this was because of scope. Just over planning. That's really what it was. It was over planning, biting off more than I could chew, and not getting to the finish line. And if I planned smaller projects and did less planning and built out projects, it's kind of hard to know what to do. And this is where a path comes along in. It's hard to know scope when you're just starting out. And that's why I really think making small games is so important. And that's what I would do differently. I would make small games. So the biggest thing I could say that helped me go from constantly switching games to actually starting the finished games was I set deadlines. Deadlines was the game changer. I stopped planning so much and I planned some basics at the beginning. I marked my start date and then I had a 3-week goal or a 4-week goal. And then I met that goal, or I tried to at least, as best I could. That made sure, okay, in 4 weeks, I can play this game, or I can develop this game in 4 weeks. I can power through anything for 4 weeks, say, and I can make it through. So setting deadlines gives you a little motivation. You're thinking, well, I know where I need to end. I know when I'm going to end. So let's get there, right? So setting deadlines was the biggest game changer for finishing games. So the sixth point is I made games, or at least I designed games, that I didn't even like. Why? Because I watched a tutorial, or I took a course, or I saw that someone was successful with this game or with this genre, and I thought I could do the same thing, right? That seems simple, or that's not that hard, or, well, if they could do it, I could do it, right? Well, I was wrong, and I got bored or burnt out really quickly, or I just didn't know enough about that genre to actually make a good game in that genre. For example, is some of my designs were 2D, and I like some 2D games. I do. I like the Castlevania series or any Metroidvania. Those are fun. But I don't gravitate towards 2D games naturally. If I pick a game or I'm going to go on Steam or play a console, 99% 3D games. I just always have been. That's always what I liked. I'm just not a huge 2D game person, but when it came to making games, a lot of the advice out there is make 2D games. And that's good advice if you're into it. It's typically easier, it's typically simpler, you can typically do things with less skill, like the art and the mechanics. But since I wasn't into 2D games, it made it that much harder. So, to fix that, I decided to make 3D games, or make a 2.5D game, right? Those were the things that, like, I can do 2.5D. Kind of complicated somewhat. Gotta get your brain to work a little differently, but 2D or 2.5 or 3D games, because that's what I like to play. And I would recommend you make games that you play, that you enjoy playing. Because if you enjoy it, I guarantee you there's someone else out there that also enjoys it. To fix the problem of us making games that I didn't like, I just started making games that I liked. And that seems simple, but I had to break it down to, okay, well, the basics are 2D or 3D. Okay, well, I would much rather play a 3D game, so let's get rid of the 2D games, and now we're going to make 3D games. Okay, so what genres do I like to play? Well, I like horror, I like survival, I kind of like shooters. I'm not that into shooters just because I'm not that good anymore. Stuff like that. Okay, well, we make a simple version of that. Sure, horror can be pretty simple. Survival can be simple as long as you don't get too out of hand. So, yes, so keep it narrow in things you like to play, you would actually like to play. If you don't like JRPGs, then don't make one, right? If you don't like 2D pixel art, then don't pixel art. Even if it's easier, even if every person on the internet is telling you to do 2D because it's simple and you can learn it, don't do it. If you don't like it, don't do it. It's simple. Do what you like. If you enjoy it, you're more likely to stick with it. Point 7 is I plan too much. And I hit on this earlier a little bit, but we're going to go a little deeper here. Is I planned way too much with all my games, all of them. And I'm not much of a planner, at least writing things down. I like to write down to-do lists and daily ideas in my notebooks, and I like physical notebooks. Other than to-do lists or some basic mechanics or character design, I don't like to plan too much more. But I kept hearing over and over and over to do game design documents, to do Trello boards, to do Milano, to do all these planning or all this planning. Thought, sure, I could do it. So I planned out characters, drew things, art, planned out mechanics and systems and subsystems and storyline and more storyline. And it was going to be great and amazing. And then I go to implement, like I said before, and I couldn't do it. It was far too complex. Or about the time I got done with planning, I was bored of the game already. So I moved on to a new game, and all that planning kind of was for nothing. Yeah, I can use it later down the line, but it really was for nothing. It was weeks, maybe sometimes months of planning when I could have just been implementing. So for me, what changed? I did less planning. I do less planning now. So what's changed for me? How do I fix that? I don't do game design documents. I can tell you from being a professional software developer for a few years now that I've worked on projects where we did zero planning, zero requirements, zero documentation, and I've worked on plans that all we did was documentation and requirements and planning and minimal implementation at first. And the projects that we did minimal documentation or zero documentation always got to the finish line quicker, always got there sooner, and always pleased the customer faster. Because then we could ship a product, a basic version of it. They could see it, they could test it, they could give us feedback, they could start using it. We take that feedback and we add some updates and implementation. And then we send it out again, the new version, and again, and again. While I've on projects where I've been on 2-3 years long, where we didn't ship the project yet in that time period, we did half the time was documentation, and then also we'd go back and have to update the documentation or the information, or the product just never shipped, at least didn't ship on time. So from my professional experience, minimal documentation is always going to be superior to documentation. And those that are out there that will die on the hill of writing GDDs or that it's helpful for some, that's fine. If you like it, if it fits your style, then go for it. I'm not saying don't do documentation. If you like that, if you're a note taker, if you're a document person, if you like making long documents, go for it. But for the average person who doesn't like writing, who doesn't like documentation, who doesn't take daily notes on things, it's probably not for you. And from a professional perspective, it's not the best thing to get you across the finish line. For me, I like a notebook. I like something I could throw in my pocket. I could jot down a few notes, and I like physical because I've tried writing notes in my phone, in the notepad, in the notes app, and then it gets lost. And then I start a new list, and then that gets lost or forgotten. Then I start a new list, and that gets lost. And I forget about it because I don't regularly open the notes app unless I will go to write something down. This I have on myself all the time, and I can easily feel it in my pocket, or it's sitting on my desk, and it's there when I need it, and I can just flip through the pages and find the most recent to-do list and mark things off or add to it. Physical is better for me. So how to fix that? I would plan minimally. At least I do. That's for me. That's what works for me. You do what you got to do. If you don't want to plan that much, or you do want to plan that much, that's fine. You do what's best for you. But I was stuck in planning mode a lot. And I got out of it by doing minimal planning and doing to-do lists and just not worrying about it that much. Point number 8 is I avoided coding at first. Even having software experience, even working at the time as a professional software developer, knowing how to code, building projects from scratch and strictly code and nothing but code, working on it, doing it daily at my job, I avoided code for game dev. Why? Because, again, I listened to the advice, I took the courses, and visual scripting was recommended. I saw games that they supposedly made most of it, if not all the games, in visual scripting, like Firewatch. Saw successful indie devs use only visual scripting, right? Not to blame them, that's what the attractive advice was to use visual scripting. It's faster, it's easier to learn. I found visual scripting wasn't as intuitive as I thought it would be. Tried Blueprints for Unreal, I tried Playmaker for Unity, and yeah, it had a lot of things there, but I just couldn't always find what I needed. I couldn't find the node or the function, or maybe it just didn't exist, and I didn't know, well, if it doesn't exist as a visual script, how do I make it exist besides making code? Either I can hard code it, or I don't know how to do it in visual scripting. How did I fix that? Well, I started using code instead, right? It's kind of a no-brainer. You might be coming from the point of you don't know code and I did know code, so I had an advantage. Well, I might have had a little advantage, but I also didn't know C#. This is my first time using Unity using C#. And I knew some C++. I was not an expert at C++, so even when I was trying it with Unreal, I still had to learn a ton. And starting from scratch with C#, I have to learn everything from scratch. I have a better understanding since I understand code, but I still have to learn it from the basics, from the ground up. If I were to start over, I would learn coding from the get-go and I wouldn't touch visual scripting at all. Now in the future, I might do a little hybrid work between the two if some things are faster, just for implementation, but I'm probably going to strictly stick with coding. What I'd recommend to you if you are on the fence of visual scripting or coding, or I know coding can be scary and it can be intimidating, I would still recommend coding. You're going to be a stronger game dev, a stronger developer if you learn coding. You will. When you learn to code, kind of rewiring your brain, how you think, right? You're finding connections, you're problem solving in ways you didn't realize you could. You're making connections, you're seeing things in the world about yourself, about daily tasks, ways you wouldn't normally look at it, right? You learn that when you start coding. You learn that every little detail matters when you code. And you just rewire your brain a little bit. So my point is, you don't get that same effect when you do visual scripting. But you do get that when you do coding. And you also can apply that when you do visual scripting. Now, visual scripting is good. It is, and it has its place, and it is fully capable of making games. Don't get me wrong, it is. Especially as an indie, you can make any indie game you want, pretty much. Especially as a solo dev. But to be the strongest dev out there, the strongest dev you can be, you should learn coding. Or, I'm not going to tell you to learn coding. I would recommend learning coding. I would start with coding. Okay. And my final point, number 9, which I think we all have done this, and we all do this all the time. It's even recommended by people out there that you should do this, which I think is nuts. But I switched game engines too much. I'm an advocate of sticking with one engine. For at least your first year, stick with one engine. Unless it's really not working for you, or unless you're having a really hard time with it, right? So I started with Playmaker, and then I messed around with Unreal, and then I messed around with Unity, and then I went back to Unreal, and now I'm back at Unity. And I'm going to stick with Unity. I've been with it for a while now, and I'm going to stick with it. Not because I think it's better, like I said earlier, but because it's what works for me. It's what I enjoy. It's what's most intuitive to me. I especially like Unity because of its C# scripting system, how I create an object and I throw a script on it, or I throw other components on it and they're on that object and it makes sense to me. Unreal's blueprint system did not really make sense to me as much. So that's why I'm sticking with Unity. Why I think it's crazy when people recommend switching engines, and they'll have all their reasons, all their crazy reasons, right? They'll say that it's good for learning to switch engines. You learn when you switch things, you try new things, you learn better. That's true, but not when you start from scratch. It has been proven by studies, by science, that in order to excel at something or to improve at something, consistency is what's important. Consistency. Not trying new things. Consistency. If you want to learn guitar or say piano or any specific instrument, you should not try other instruments. You shouldn't. Doesn't matter. They still play music. You shouldn't try them. You shouldn't even try different styles of that instrument. Like if I want to play guitar, I start with an acoustic guitar. A month later, I buy an electric guitar, and then a month later, I buy a bass guitar, and then a month later, I buy a 12-string guitar or a ukulele. I'm not getting any better at learning just the basic guitar. I need to stick with learning the acoustic guitar, say if that was something. You can start with electric if you want, but start with one, but stick with it. If I want to make games, my end goal is to learn to make games. All game engines can make games. All of them can. What is going to get you to the finish line quicker? Switching engines every month or sticking with one engine? Say you set a goal of 1 year and you said in 1 year, I'm going to publish a game I enjoy playing. What is going to be better if you start with one engine and you, for 12 months, you learn that engine and you get proficient at that engine and you make a game versus starting with Unity, then 3 months down the line, start with Unreal, then 3 months down the line, Playmaker, and then 3 months down the line, Godot. What's going to be a better outcome? Which one is going to get you closer to your end? Sticking with one engine. Now, like I said earlier, if the engine is really, really bothering you, like I was having major issues with C++ with Unreal. Major issues. Every time I would close the project, it was fully functional. And then I'd open the project the next day and not have done anything different. And I would have build errors. And that happened over and over again. If you're having those kinds of issues and you're just not enjoying the engine at all, then switch. I'm not saying you can't switch an engine, but I'm saying if your goal is to make games and you really want to make games and learn the process of game dev and you want to learn it the fastest and the most efficient way possible, sticking with one engine is going to do that. Same thing for Unity. If you don't like Unity, switch. If you don't like Godot, switch. But don't just switch because a new fancy engine came out, or because you watched a video and this new developer is using Godot, or because this one's using Unreal, or this game I really like to play is in Unreal. Those aren't good reasons to switch. Stick with an engine. Again, I'm not telling you what to do, but from my own personal experience and from what I know about how to learn efficiently, sticking with an engine is the best thing for you. Because the better I am at an engine, the easier it is for me to make games. Every time, the longer I stick with an engine and the better I get, every time I start up a new project, I'm going to get to the finish line that much quicker, or get to prototype that much quicker, or get to the demo that much quicker, because I have all these years of previous experience, all these years of it, instead of 3 months of experience. You'll also hear that, well, once you learn one engine, another engine is easy. Yes, that's kind of true, but not necessarily true. And also, spending a month on an engine, you're not learning an engine. Spending 3 months on an engine, you're not learning an engine. You're still brand new to that engine. You have to spend a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. There's still new things that veteran developers are still learning and figuring out that they didn't know their engine could do. So to claim that, well, I used an engine for 3 months and that made me better to learn this other engine, that's just garbage. That's not true. That's not going to get you anywhere. Another thing that I hear that kind of blows my mind is you'll hear people on forums or in comments or whatnot, you'll hear them say to make an engine based on games that you want to design or that you want to make. And this is kind of true, but it's only true to the fact that you need to know, starting out, if you want to make 2D games or 3D games. Any other genre doesn't matter. It doesn't. Horror games don't matter. Survival games don't matter. Every engine can do some aspect of that. All you need to know is, do you want to make 2D games or 3D games? Because starting out, if you're a brand new developer, you don't know how to make games. And since you don't know how to make games, You can't pick an engine based on the games you want to make because you don't know what games you want to make. You don't know how to make those games. So even if you did know what games you want to make, you don't know what capabilities each engine offers. Even by watching videos, it's still not enough. You don't know until you're actually in the engine, experiencing it, trying things out, that you know what that engine's capable of and if you like working with it. The fact that there's advice out there that says to pick an engine based on the game that you want to make is not good advice. You can draw the line at 2D or 3D, and then it stops there. You don't need to know anything more. You need to know if your engine that you want to use can do 2D games or 3D games, or both. That's all that matters when it comes to making a game. That's all. That's all when picking an engine, that's all that matters. Yeah, if I were to change anything about this, about switching engines, I wouldn't switch engines, at least not for my first year, unless I had to, like I did. I didn't like Unreal, just for the fact that it's having build errors. That's pretty much the only reason, and I wasn't a huge fan of the blueprints, but I didn't really like Unreal, so I switched to Unity, and I'm loving it. Those are the 9 mistakes I've made, or points, or my experience learning game dev. And I hope what I laid out here helps you or helps someone out there in this process, in this long journey of game dev. If you're interested in actually learning game dev in a structured path that is based on my own experience, teaching myself software development and landing a career working on multi-million and multi-billion dollar projects, you can check out my community 10th Legion Games, where I lay out exactly what I did and exactly what you should do for game dev, or what you can do for game dev. And you'll know exactly what to do for your first year of game dev. You won't be confused, you won't be lost, and you'll have direct access to me and the game dev community that's there to support you on your journey. So if you enjoyed this video and you got something out of it, please like and subscribe. Thanks.